Good evening. My name is Alana Arce. My PowerPoint is titled DNA Should Be Prioritized Over Fingerprints, and this is for my senior capstone in crime science class. Before I begin speaking about, or before I go more in depth about how I believe that DNA should be prioritized over fingerprints, I want to give a more detailed definition of what fingerprint analysis is. So first, I would like to mention that there are many principles of fingerprint analysis. They are known as unique patterns, which are made by friction ridges and furrows, which you can see on your thumbs, your fingers, and you can also see it in the palm of your hands. So first off, we have the loops. Loops are prints that recurve back on themselves and kind of form like a loop shape like this. Then you have arches. Arches are more like a wave-like pattern. They usually go up and then they go down. They have a sharper point, and they make up about 5% of all pattern types. And then third, we have whorls, which are like circles like this. They go like this on your thumb. They are known as a circular or spiral patterns. They're more like tiny whirlpools. Now, whorls actually make up about 35% of pattern types, and I also want to mention that they are easy to collect. Fingerprints are very easy to collect since they can be left anywhere, and they're very easy to identify just because of their individuality, which has established analysis techniques, and honestly, it made them a cornerstone for criminal investigations, as I mentioned many times in this essay. Now, with DNA analysis, I do want to mention that the emergence of this has revolutionized the way we catch perpetrators and also the way in which exonerate the innocent. DNA can offer precision and reliability that fingerprints just simply cannot. I would say that DNA, known as deoxyribonucleic acid, was discovered to be used as evidence. Forensic science has made it a very significant change in the field regarding to collection of evidence. I believe that DNA evidence should be prioritized over fingerprints due to its superior persistence, power, and potential for exonerating the wrongly convicted, which I also mention in this paper. There are many reasons why I believe that DNA would be better for many cases with little to no evidence, which have remained cold for many years, which these are known as cold case files. However, most of these are never reopened with the hope of they're never going to find the culprit, but then DNA analysis has shown that throughout the years it has helped reopen these and solve them. For example, familial DNA testing has helped in many cases. Let's say that, for example, there was a case that happened years ago. They never found the suspect. They couldn't match DNA. It's been 10 years. Family of this suspect that we still don't know who it is. Let's say he's in jail, he's in prison. They take his DNA, they book him, they do everything, and then somehow that DNA matches to another one in a system, and then it all adds up, and that has helped many cases. As I said, the system would be the CODIS database. I believe that there can be a few problems with fingerprint analysis. First, as I mentioned, they can be so easily and quickly left behind by anyone, anywhere, at any time, especially at a crime scene. You never know who's been there, you never know what happened, you just see the fingerprints. Another main problem that I would say is how fingerprint evidence can easily deteriorate over time due to environmental factors like wind, rain, storms, etc. I would say that it's the base of many wrongful convictions in forensic science in the criminal justice system, often because the fingerprint analysis techniques or interpretations are flawed or could be flawed most of the time. The error rates of fingerprint analysis used as evidence are very complex. It can be due to many reasons, such as lack of training, the quality of the fingerprint when it was taken from the crime scene, and different analysis methods like the FIS, right? I would say that now, when you're collecting DNA evidence, one can recover it with many biological materials. These can be saliva, blood, semen, even skin flakes. So it makes it a lot more detailed and precise than fingerprints do. As time has gone by, DNA evidence has become much more prevalent than it was before. DNA testing methods, however, were introduced in the 1990s. They were introduced by explaining how testing these physical evidence could exclude a person's DNA from just a simple physical sample, which can provide much more substantial evidence for determining wrongful convictions. Now, in my essay, I mentioned how findings from the FBI lab reported up to 25% of DNA analysis results contributed to a 1% wrongful conviction rate. The FBI found that DNA testing has exonerated a total of 28 people who would have otherwise remained incarcerated if it weren't for these biological materials. I would say that by prioritizing DNA evidence, the risk of wrongful convictions that are usually mainly based on fingerprint evidence would be significantly reduced. We would see a much bigger difference in the years to come. This can ensure a more reliable and just legal criminal justice system in general. I would say that DNA evidence can be beneficial in cases without a known suspect, like I mentioned before, with familial DNA. I would say that DNA profiles generated from evidence that can be used to search the state's database of convicted offenders and arrestee DNA samples. Now, there has always been a very strong debate between how fingerprints versus DNA works in court with jury convictions. I mentioned that there was a Queensland study on homicide cases how they found that DNA evidence presented by the prosecutors was the strongest predictor of cases going to court, right? This study was shown that jurors were much more likely to convict when the prosecution used evidence instead of any other type of evidence like fingerprinting. However, fingerprints did have a big impact because how I mentioned before, fingerprints analysis evidence has always been very top in when trying to solve a crime scene, right? But many people don't know or they haven't made enough research on how much DNA can help solve cases. Here, other predictors of jury decisions that were as popular as DNA evidence would be the sex of the victim and the recorded statements such as confessions and denials by the police, right? But DNA evidence did lead to a higher proportion of homicide cases that would reach court. DNA evidence was the significant predictor of decisions by the Department of Public Prosecution's Office to Prosecute. This study revealed the significant association between DNA evidence and a case being able to reach court. Cases that included DNA analysis were 14.69 times more likely to proceed to trial than cases that did not have DNA evidence in them. Now, I would like to mention DNA profiling, which was developed in the mid-1980s. This is a technique used to analyze different genetic material, right? After this was fully developed, and other countries started doing their research, they began developing their own DNA databases. According to the Forensics Genetics Policy Initiative, 60 countries currently store forensic DNA profiles, which has been a very big increase in these recent years. In every database, there are two different types of profiles that exist. You have the known, and then you have the unknown. When collecting the profiles, the known are usually contributed by an offender, and then the unknown are usually collected at the crime scene, right? There's a journal that mentions how DNA traces that were found at different crime scenes helped police solve many investigations. The police departments have benefited from using forensic science at the operational level. Another thing about DNA evidence and profiling is it can also be used at a very strategic level, right? There are many sources of information that are primarily composed of recorded crime data, victim surveys, and self-report studies that people publish, right? Using the DNA databases, they really have a significant advantage for criminological research by creating, as I mentioned, possible links to an offense created by this individual, whether they have the offender's identity or not. Yes, I would say that DNA evidence can be very compelling, but also has its limitations, just like any piece of evidence. There are many cases that have been found where there's DNA fraud, which is when a suspect can plant fake hair or a fake piece of hair or skin flakes or blood, saliva, semen, whatever, to commit fraud, and then at the end lead the police and detectives away from who the true suspect is. However, yes, fingerprint analysis can be a very valuable tool in forensic investigations, but I believe that it's very hard to compare it to DNA evidence and its supremacy. The accuracy of DNA evidence, the persistence and potential can just create a massive shift in focus in the crime science scene. I would say that we should start prioritizing DNA sample collections. We know that DNA samples are known to degrade over time, or it can be affected by being stored in poor environmental conditions, which may hinder analysis, right? I propose more strict protocols for collection, storage, and analysis. I also propose more training on DNA handling to police officers, detectives, investigators, any forensic team really, to just so they can learn officially how to follow crucial steps in maintaining the highest standards for DNA evidence handling. Within the next couple of years, I believe that technology will just keep evolving for the forensic science and the criminal justice system, and it will become a lot more critical, the DNA. I believe that this can be known as a new era of forensic investigation based on 100% accuracy. Thank you so much for your attention.